Okay, looks like everything loaded up. So today I'm working together with, in my harness, LeanAI with Quinn 3.6 27B to see if it can build the necessary or bring in all of the necessary tools into a blank project in VS Codium, build all the tools or collect all of the tools necessary to be able to build a 1-bit ternary LLM. It's led me to believe that it can generate somewhere between a 200 million and a 400 million not context window, 200 million to 400 million base model, so not a billion. For that, I would require a lot more hardware, it's telling me. It's saying that there's no chance that my hardware could generate anything more than a 200 million to 400 million large language model, which still, if this works, would be fantastic if I can actually have a conversation, even if it's a small model and it doesn't give good answers. The goal here is not to generate an LLM that's anywhere near ChatGPT or Claude or anybody else. But I'm really fascinated by the idea of the 1-bit ternary LLMs. And my thought process here is between how KV Cache works and Google's Google's TurboQuant paper and Microsoft's, and I think Bamboo Labs maybe. Microsoft has the BitNet and Bamboo. Is it Bamboo Labs? Hold on. 1-bit LLM Bamboo Labs. I might be wrong on the name of the. I'm sorry, Bonsai. I said Bamboo Labs. Bonsai has a 1-bit ternary model, but their 1-bit system literally is just using, I believe, 0 and 1, where Microsoft's 1-bit system is using -1, 0, and 1. And presumably all of those can run on CPU and VRAM significantly more efficiently than floating point operators. And my thought is that as this technology progresses, LLMs and whatnot, that there's no chance that the current structure of how everything's set up ever works out mathematically, financially mathematically, because I think Microsoft's BitNet system makes more sense, right? And all of this never should have been beyond the research phase, ChatGPT and Claude and everything else, until we arrived at a system like BitNet. But could we have gotten there without knowing how expensive it was to get to this point with GPT and with Claude Code? I don't know. Maybe not. The research papers may have never been written, or they could have just been written and sealed off behind closed doors at Microsoft, or sealed off behind closed doors at Google, with DeepMind. I think still that even regular LLMs are not going to be the answer, or even ternary models like Microsoft's BitNet is going to be the answer. I think the answer is going to lie somewhere in the middle with a ternary model LLM that also uses I believe the system's called JEPA. JEPA. fact check myself so I'm not saying stupid things. Um, so yeah, so Jan LeCun's JEPA type structure where LLMs are actually learning from lived experience versus just forced data, right? I think there's going to be some sort of middle ground where the LLM part of it is going to matter, right? And then there's going to be like an extra layer here where Jan LeCun is correct too, where his piece will be on top of it or will be part of the transformer layer that will work with the model so that it can learn better. And I'm thinking that also MOE is going to be a part of it, right? So I think there's going to be this weird amalgamation of all of these amazing technologies that nobody's arrived at. And I don't think I'm going to be the first, but I would like to kind of play with it. I don't have the money to build something like what they're doing, but I think it would be really neat if I could play with something at home that tried to conceptually bring these things together, even if it's a super small model and it can't really do much more than chat. Um, if I could build a ternary model, my thinking is of somewhere around 200 to 400 million parameters. That was the word I was trying to think of earlier. And then incorporate somehow the way that JEPA works as best as I can. Obviously, I don't have exact access to Jan LeCun's mind, but I can look at the data and the papers that he's written just to see if I can try to incorporate something similar. I'm sure I'll fail at building exactly his vision, but it would be cool if I could get close, even if I was only at like 60 or 70% of what his vision is, um, to allow that 400 million parameter model, large language model, to be able to grow to a larger model based on his idea of JEPA. Um, so that's kind of my thinking, and I don't know. I just thought it would be kind of cool to see, can the LeanAI harness build or construct the scaffolding to even build a ternary model? That's phase one, right? If it can build a ternary model successfully of 200 million to 400 million parameters, um, because I've found my model plus me doing research has found very varying data based on the paper and what you look at on what the actual output of the size of this model will be. So anyways, we'll find out at the end on what we can produce. But if I could produce a model that can at least, you can say hi to it and it says hi back, and it can, just have simple, very simple conversations. It's not going to be answering any real questions or doing anything that impresses anyone. But then create a layer that it's a part of the model that allows it to grow somehow. I think that would be ideal, right? I think that would be, and now I am not stupid enough to think that I'm going to build the next great thing that's going to take over anything. That's probably going to be Jan LeCun or some brilliant PhD that's currently working at ChatGPT or Claude or wherever. But it would still, I don't know. I'm fascinated by this technology. I'm fascinated by the Chinese researchers as well, at how um, uh, no, Alibaba. Does Alibaba make Quinn? No, I can't remember. Quinn. Yeah. Okay, Alibaba. Okay, good. I wasn't too far off. Um, I'm really fascinated at by how they were able to develop their thinking phase. Now, and I understand, like, uh, the argument that, some of these Chinese researchers, like from DeepSeek, were able to exfiltrate the training data that Claude was using and the training data that ChatGPT was using, and that's kind of not great. But let's be honest, what big technology company did not steal from another technology company? Let's look at the very beginning, right? We go back to Xerox and we go back to Apple and Steve Jobs stealing the idea for the mouse, right? And then, well, I guess kind of stealing because Xerox thought it was kind of dumb, so they weren't going to implement it, and then whatever, and then Bill Gates and DOS, and the list goes on and on and on, and Facebook and Winkle, Binkle. I don't know how to say their name. The twins. I apologize to them if they ever watch this video that I can't pronounce your name correctly, and that's on me. Sorry about that. But um, it just seems like almost all good technology is starts out being developed by one company or one person, and then is commandeered by another person. And generally, what ends up happening is one of two things. Either the original company is able to execute on it much better than the secondary company that borrowed, stole, whatever, the technology, and is able to outperform them, or the secondary company has a better vision for that product that the original company never would have been able to execute on. And had they not borrowed that technology, we never would have probably ever even seen it, and our lives would have not ever been improved by that technology. It just would have not really existed in our worlds. So I don't know. I think it would be really cool. I just think it'd be fun to play with this. And then, um, I think it would also be neat to, um, if I can build this and have a standard chatbot, then, and it can grow, after I get the standard chatbot built, because first step, you got to start at first principles and see what you can do. And the reason I'm using Quinn 3.6 27B, again, I'm not a PhD. I build decks for a living. I do know how to write code as well. I did work as a developer for several years. However, um, I am not great at reading research papers. I find them quite boring. I find that researchers a lot of times bury the lead. I don't necessarily fault them for any of this. I'm just saying that sometimes they are um, not the best paper writers for regular people. Obviously, they're writing the papers for other people that have PhDs that just want to get to the point that, and if you read these papers on a regular basis and you are a PhD, you probably know how to skip through the paper to get to what you want. I do not. So, anyways, again, skill issue on my part. But I think it'd be really cool if Quinn can pull off, especially a 27B model. It's a fairly small model. Pull off being able to generate another small model, or generate the tools required to create another small model on my local system, and then be able to play with the idea of creating a layer on top that would be like the JEPA system or something similar to it, that would allow that small model to like begin to grow, and then see what kind of harnesses actually needed. Because I really think ultimately, like, there's so many pieces right now that are disparate, that are separated, that need to be brought together for any of this to work successfully. There's the cache problem. There's the size of the model problem. So that's a cost problem, right? Both of those are cost problems and performance problems, right? Um, I think if we could convert the KV cache into something that Um, I think if all these things came together, the ternary systems that Bonsai and Microsoft are both developing, the KV cache being shifted from FP16 to also being being a ternary type system, I think that just completely dramatically changes. Like, that's so fantastic. I think that completely dramatically changes the cost analysis on how these things work. So if Quinn can build this scaffolding for me to where I can generate a 1-bit ternary system or LLM, then which will take about a month if this scaffolding works. Then my next step is, can I add on something like JEPA, or at least something close to it, because I don't fully understand how it works. And then the final step, if that works, then what kind of harness could you put around that for that model to actually be able to do something? Now, obviously, being such a small model, I don't imagine that I'd be able to do anything with it other than maybe with a harness it could respond to emails properly. Other than that, I don't know that this model is um, going to actually be able to do anything useful. But um, I still think it'd be pretty neat to, experiment with this, see how it goes. And I hope other people are curious, um, because I think it would be a really sad day if all of these models and how all of this works is only known and powered by really large companies, right? That can build these. I think that um, these models need to, and again, the big models will never be replaced, but could we at home be able to generate models that are capable um, of doing simple tasks, right? Maybe this turns into, again, then you morph it into an MOE, right? So then you have this JEPA layer for each of your 400 million parameter, 200 to 400 million parameter models, right? Each of those models has a different specialty, right? Like this first one is going to be focused just on English comprehension, no other languages, just English, just the ability to respond to a simple hello world, hello prompt, and then it, can say hi back or whatever, or like whatever. And then maybe another model that's around the same size that has a specialty in mathematics. And then maybe you get to another model that has a specialty in physics, and then another model that has a specialty in PHP, another model that's a specialty in Python. Like, so then you get all these small models that can do these different things, and then that creates your MOE, and then you just need your small model that then is your 200 to 400 million context or uh, parameter model that is your not your transformer. Is it the transformer? Oh man, I'm so out of my league here. Um, your primary model that then is able to then, decide which of those models the request needs to go to or activate to. But then ultimately you arrive at a system where maybe it ends up being, a 7 billion parameter MOE model with 200 to 400 million parameter context, right? But all of these models, if that primary direction model or transformer, yeah, that's not the right word. I'm losing it. Anyways, um, if that is able to then direct the flow to the um, proper expert, then maybe you could actually get something useful out of a small model and then be able to build on top of that, right? You end up with, you could end up with a 27 billion parameter model um, that, has grown out of your small experts. Um, I don't know. I think the whole idea is fascinating. I'd like to play with it and I'd like to be knowledgeable about it. Um, will this turn into anything? Probably not, but it's still fun to play with and fun to learn. And I hope other people are interested in it. I think, again, it'll be sad. Obviously, Meta has kind of left the game. So our only options are um, the Chinese uh, big corporations that are still releasing open weight models that are reasonable, like Quinn 3.6. And I don't, I don't know. I think politics are dumb. Um, I don't even want to get into politics because I don't think the Chinese people have anything against us, and I don't think we should have anything against them. I think I wish world peace was a thing, man. I think politics are dumb. I wish the best for everyone, and I think we're all people, and at some level, we'll all just have to remember that, yeah, that, and yeah, politics are dumb. I don't want to get into that too much, so. I think it's cool though that they're releasing stuff. Uh, could there be some sort of secret behind the scenes thing that Quinn 3.6 is able to do to my system or other people's systems and whatever? I'm sure there is. I mean, do I think the researchers baked it in there? No, it's probably somebody like, our NSA tries to bake stuff into Linux, right? I mean, or our NSA tries to make encryption not as good. Like, I mean, every government is just not great. All of our governments make mistakes and do things that are weird because we don't trust each other and it's dumb. And if we all had PhDs and we're all researchers, maybe the world would be a better place. We'd all just argue over dumb stuff like our ternary model is the future. And then we'd have heated debates about it, right? And we'd be throwing papers at each other and then just move on with our day. And then we'd have to prove it out in the market, right? Uh, which person was right? Ah, man, if the world worked like that, I just feel like it'd be a better world for all of us. Maybe we'll get there one day, but I don't know. I guess we'll find out if Quinn 3.6 can build the scaffolding required to then build a 1-bit ternary model. I don't know. It'd be pretty neat if it can. And then there's a whole bunch of research behind memory, and I personally am of the opinion, is KV cache the right option? I I don't know. I don't think it is. I think there's somebody smart out there that's going to find, just like Google focused on creating the paper for TurboQuant on how we can reduce the KV cache size and not necessarily lose that much precision. Um, I think some genius out there, PhD person, is gonna eventually take the time to discover that there's probably something better than how we're using KV cache as a memory system, um, as a working memory system for models. And I think when that breakthrough happens, coupled with ternary and JEPA and GPU technology getting better, CPU hardware getting better, I think ultimately the whole idea that these models need to be hosted in some giant data center just doesn't make sense. And I just don't, I feel like these big companies are reliant on the idea that um, the only way they're going to find these answers is asking the AIs to come up with the solutions themselves. And I think these models are really good with the way they're built for now, with the exception of DeepMind. DeepMind is way beyond my understanding, and I think that it's fascinating. However, it's not really something that's being released to us. I mean, there's Gemini, but I think that DeepMind, and I know that's produced by DeepMind, but I think the original context and the way they were doing DeepMind is a little bit different than um, straight LLM, and was leaning more towards the research part. It was leaning more towards the same territory that Jan LeCun was leaning towards, of it being able to, with their whole idea of, it was able to learn how games worked and then be able to beat all these different games. And then they tried it on StarCraft and they were able to beat some of the best of StarCraft, and they were able to beat um, the best people at Go. Um, I think if we can get back to, if we can bring all of these things together in a way where these models are not static any longer, that when you get a local model, that it's not like this static thing that you have, that it has the ability to continue to expand its knowledge. Some of it permanent knowledge that it will expand, some of it temporary knowledge is just ability to learn things way quicker than we can. Um, I think that's going to be the day where then, once we hit that point, that will be the inflection point for us moving towards a real AGI situation. But I think the idea of we need to build all these data centers to power these AIs and whatnot, and this weird, we need to send we need to spawn more agents to do this thing and that thing and then this other thing because the context windows are so small. Like okay, so if we know the context windows are the problem, why are we not devoting more research? And maybe they are behind closed doors that I'm not seeing, but I'm not seeing a bunch of papers coming out like, oh, we're researching these other ways to manage the KV cache, like other than TurboQuant, which is just reducing the floating points. There's like, why don't we look at the base of the problem and say maybe KV cache isn't the answer, maybe there's something else. And I wish I was smarter to solve that problem, but I'll keep reading the papers and see if there's a something that pops up that makes sense. But I think if we can crack that, this whole idea of agents and subagents and the snake eating its tail will go away. I just think that's a bad way to go through the process, especially with the fact that we can't even solve the hallucination problem with LLMs. Like we haven't even solved that problem, which is most likely related to quantization, which obviously is kind of a problem, which is why I think ternary is probably a better solution to this problem than continuing to rely on floats, just because the expense is extraordinary. Um, So I think Microsoft is really on to something with their plan. Um, and then also Bonsai. Although I think Microsoft's is a little bit smarter with -1, 0, and 1 versus just going with 0 and 1 or -1 and 1, whatever Bonsai was doing. I can't remember exactly what their plan was. Um, but I think that I think yeah, once we solve whatever weirdness we currently have going on with the KV cache, and we get past this idea that we need to use floating point operators to build these models, and we recognize the fact that I think surprisingly of all the and I wish I knew the name of the person who at Microsoft or the name of the team at Microsoft that wrote the paper about and developed BitNet. And I wonder if that's why they're kind of decoupling from Microsoft might be decoupling a little bit from uh, OpenAI because they have BitNet now. I wonder if that might be part of the thing of why they're kind of letting OpenAI and ChatGPT go do its own thing, because they're like, this can't scale, right? Somebody smart there is finally convinced. I don't remember the name of the current CEO of Microsoft, but has finally convinced them that there's no way that this is actually financially feasible to continue um, ChatGPT the way it is based on floating point numbers, because the scale and the power that's required and the financial output just doesn't make sense. So yeah, I think ternary is going to be the future. I think since Microsoft and Bonsai are the only two labs that I've seen that are currently running that, um, I think they might win. They might win in that space, and I think that will finally bring the price down of running AI to a sane level and actually make the current data centers we have plenty and plentiful. And I think it also benefits, companies like SpaceX and Elon Musk's company. Um, uh, what is it, XAI or whatever, that builds Grok. I think if when they're developing, Elon's new plan of launching satellites into space with solar panels that then will power the AI, which then will power the machines, I think the only way we get there, because once you launch a satellite, right, and it has, let's say, I don't know, 50 H200s or whatever it is on each satellite, right? Um, you can't upgrade the hardware in those satellites, right? I mean, no one's going to be flying up there to swap out the GPUs. So one of two things either happens: that satellite is now abandoned, floating there, almost never used for anything, or two, you optimize the system, which I think ternary does, um, to reposition the models to still be able to use that hardware in a much more efficient way. And I'm very confused at how, when Microsoft released BitNet and Bonsai released um, their ternary model, how these big labs like OpenAI and Claude and whatnot have not repositioned their primary training data to start over to a certain extent, devoted 10% of the resources to exploring that optimization. Um, and again, I'm really frustrated that nobody's that I've seen has done any kind of research on that idea of the KV cache maybe isn't the option. There's probably a better scientific approach to managing the memory for these models that would also reduce hallucinations at the end of the day. I just feel like the memory problem is currently a big problem, but it'll be fun to play with this at home. And if I can generate a 200 million context model and then implement some form of JEPA-ish system on top of it that allows it to learn and then turn that into an MOE that then can learn and grow. I think that's the future for everybody. Um, Now, will, will I be able to develop something with the help of a local model, Quinn 3.6 in this context, to pull all this off? Probably not. I don't think I'm smart enough, and I don't think Quinn's smart enough to do this on our own. But it'll be fun to experiment with. It'll be fun to learn. Um, I personally feel like if you do a lot of reading on your own and you then work with a local model to try to help you implement some of what you've learned. I think local models are really good given the proper tools and the proper harness at if you have a fairly sound idea at being able to bring all those things together to produce a proof of concept. And then obviously I'll have to go through and review the code and whatnot that this produces if there are any issues. But I think that's the usefulness of LLM right now. I've used Claude, I've used Codex. I think whatever they've done recently to Claude 4.7, and which I've had issues with. I had the Pro subscription, I think, is the $100 a month one, and then I also had a subscription to Codex, and both of them recently had significant issues where Claude decided not to follow the instructions I gave it and only paid attention to half of what I asked it to do. And then when asked why it decided to not follow the instructions or only implement half of what I said and then not ask any questions, its response is, I've been structurally trained to take action over following instructions. Like, what? Like, I get that there are more and more people YOLO coding, but that is a really dangerous path to go down. Why would you do? And Codex is doing the same thing. Like, the models are not strong enough yet. No, nothing in this universe until we hit AGI. And even when we do that, it doesn't make sense, right? You can't. There's no way to take what's in my brain, turn it into, let's say, 6 paragraphs, right? And then that is somehow the entire full context, and then the LLM is then going to implement my vision. There's no chance. Like, I guarantee you, Steve Jobs, when he was working at Apple and he was still with us, he probably had to have thousands of hours of meetings with his different teams and multiple conversations, and he had to answer questions or give feedback in different direction. And yes, he had very smart people working for him, and they really helped him, but it was that collaboration that made it work. And right now, I feel like Codex and Claude are going in the wrong direction, and they're removing that collaboration of the human and the AI, and they're opting for the YOLO method of, you give me whatever you can, and I will just generate something, even if it's garbage. Like, I get that it makes it look magical. It's a good magic trick, I guess, but it's not ideal. It doesn't, I just, I don't know. It's frustrating. I just really had, like, I felt like AI was on a good path. Um, and really, I hate the fact that we even call it AI. I think really we're still at the large language model level. I don't think this is really AI. AI is now, when I was growing up, AI is now what we call AGI. Uh, but I guess, since the terminology got commandeered, I guess now we're at AI. Uh, but I really thought we were on a good path of, uh, that interaction of human and LLM to provide that collaboration was going to get us to a point where um, that back and forth would get us to a point where real things were able to be created. which is why I created LeanAI, which is, you know, a local extension for your VS Code, JetBrains IDE, um, uh, or your VS Codium, which is what I use, VS Codium, which I struggled with for a long time on this, generating just this extension for everybody to download and use, which still needs some work. Like I realized I need to update the documentation on where you point in LeanAI, and this might be the main reason it hasn't been picked up a lot, but in LeanAI, depending on how you install the extension or I'm sorry, it's not even how you install the extension, it's how you run your editor. Like if you're running the snap package of Visual Studio Code and then you install the extension, the settings here live in a very wild place. And so making sure that you have your Python path set properly is a kind of complicated thing that I need to work out still, and I need to document in the GitHub repository. I think that may be a big thing that people might be struggling with, and when they're not able to implement a lot of the settings that are helpful on here, like the AI actually being able to generate text testing scenarios where it uses vision to be able to take screenshots of the work it's doing and then review those screenshots to see if it actually implemented what the user requested. Because again, I think testing is important because it's always been a part of developing software. I think the idea that that's not baked into, it's not baked well into the harnesses is kind of wild and crazy. I think there are so many. I think AI could be absolutely phenomenal, but it's not right now because it's not being implemented properly and it's unfortunately not being used properly. But for it to be used properly, like I said, I struggled a lot with getting this harness to work. And the only way I finally was able to get a breakthrough on getting this harness to work properly was because of I found Matt Pocock. Sorry, 1 second. I think my son's home. Sorry about that. I think there might be some more barking. My son's getting home. So Matt Pocock released a couple of just like he is on the ball, super smart guy. He released the Grill Me skill, which I put into LeanAI. And I think that is absolutely the most amazing skill um, that has ever been generated. And okay, 1 second, guys. I'm sorry. So, um, so, anyways, Matt Pocock's skill, Grill Me, I feel like is certainly a missing piece of the puzzle that I wish was implemented more into Codex and by default into something like Claude. Um, I think without it, it's um, I think I think AI is useless without that collaboration. I think then it's just making decisions on its own that um, may not be based on reality. So I guess that's going to be all my streaming tonight. Thank you, anybody that was watching. I appreciate it. And I don't know if any of this was useful, but it'll be exciting to see. This will be the first video in a series of can I build a 1-bit ternary LLM with the help of a harness and Quinn 3.627b, and will it come out useful? Be kind of cool to see. All right, thanks for watching.